Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. So today we have Paul Dermody, who's no stranger to the podcast. And this is actually going to be episode number 100. So it's great to have you on for that little milestone because you're the reason I started doing podcasting. I remember I was telling you that I was going to start for 2 years. And then one day on a call, you were like, when's that podcast coming? And I was like, what podcast? Didn't know what you were talking about. Or I pretended I didn't. And I told you, I'll do it it was like 3 months in the future. And you said, what are you doing this weekend? And I was like, nothing really. This is, I think, 2020 or so, or 2021. And you're like, right, I want to see it out by Monday. And by Monday, it was up. By Tuesday, it was like live. So here we are. Fast forward.
Can't be half
couple of
pregnant.
years. Yeah, exactly. So you're an online coach, personal trainer, and similar enough to myself, but your main focus is on, or the last while it has been on, kind of helping people break free from dieting, yo-yo dieting, breaking the binge restrict cycle. What sort of got you going from maybe just calorie tracking and the typical run-of-the-mill stuff to focusing on that specifically? Because it's quite like niche.
Probably the amount of coaches that are online now talking about a calorie deficit. If the social media landscape was very different when I started coaching. I'm 10 years now. And I was using very simple analogies, helping people kind of understand the nutrient profile, like what you eat is important, but also why and how much. And then there's kind of like what you eat influences how much you eat. Like it's very difficult to want to eat an omelette after having a bag of Skittles, for instance.
Yeah.
But honestly, I just kind of got a little bit sick of the message I was putting out there in terms of step counts and calories. When I say sick of it, I noticed that people who were stuck in disordered eating patterns or who had difficulty with their body image, they didn't really need more information about steps and the importance of a calorie deficit. I felt that more people who were trying to get themselves into a deficit, ironically, were struggling the most. So I just kind of saw an opportunity, and I have a passion for helping people break out of the diet restrict cycle because it's kind of my own personal history. I don't tend to use my own story a lot in my content, obviously. But I am the classic person who grew up asking, is this food fattening? Is this food healthy? Not really understanding the principles of nutrition, so never really getting a fundamental understanding. So then I would find myself in restriction and binge cycles, which got worse every single time I tried to restrict. Part knowledge, but also part, low self-esteem, bad body image. Being a teenager didn't help. I can't imagine what it's like nowadays for teenagers with the social media landscape because I didn't have that stress. I had fitness magazines. But my passion is basically that. I love life. I love psychology. I love people. And I've been able to
merge them all together
for a really wonderful career. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I think to sum up kind of what you do, I think you came up with a phrase, which is don't hit the fucker button. And like a lot of people have now used that phrase, and I see that like on a regular basis in that sort of area, like with helping break free from the binge restrict cycle and stuff. But how sort of powerful do you think that phrase has been for people, first of all, and then for you as a business? Because I know that was the title of a podcast, which did really well and led to like getting more clients. And
that podcast changed my life.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts. That podcast episode is a 6-figure piece of content. Simple as that. And it was a throwaway comment that I made on an episode before it, where I said, you're not struggling because you need more information about a calorie deficit. You struggle because every time you stress to it to the nth degree, you hit the fuck it button and end up eating more than you intended. And I still get emails to this day in the coaching application sense, fuck it button pusher. 2025. I recorded that episode 7 years ago. So I've seen a lot of obviously coaches and online coaches. I mean, look, the phrase isn't mine. I get it. Like anyone can say a button. Don't press the giant button. Yeah. I get that. But I actually have seen a significant amount of people copy word for word posts and podcasts that I have on the topic. And I'm sure they're getting credit for it and power to them. But from my perspective, that was when I realized the depth of how many people were struggling with, dare I say, the psychology of eating. And as much as I've shifted in the last few years, I've kind of used to use calorie tracking things with clients in the past. I really did see that in the last few years, particularly, that I don't think it's where people are struggling anymore. I think it is with body image, feelings of self-worth. Essentially, Eanna, my kind of tagline in my head now is I do a couple of things. I help people who have been left behind by the diet industry. I help people who don't relate to the diet industry. And I like to think I change the way people see themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, I've always had you sort of as an influence, as a coach and personal trainer and stuff. And I was just thinking about this in the car on the way over, that I don't know if I would have realized how important it is to not be the calorie tracking guy. And that's fine, that works for some people. And I do even have some clients who they just want to track calories and it works. They've never had really any disordered eating, and that's great. But there's so many people, as you said, who are left behind. And I talk to them on a regular basis who are afraid to eat eggs because of cholesterol, or they're fattening, or they've done slimming clubs. I can't say that in case I get sued. Slimming clubs for years. It's purely opinion, not fact, by the way. So they've done them for years, and they have this, what they think is normal way of eating, and they think everybody struggles with food to that extent. But I don't think I would have been able to really focus on that if I hadn't consumed your content and stuff. And I know there's so many other coaches as well who would be in that boat. And especially, we'll say when you started, did you say 10 years?
10 years coaching.
Yeah, so I think I've been consuming your content for like 9-10 years, and slowly seen that change as well. And back then, that definitely wasn't being talked about as much as it is now. Even the word calorie deficit was quite new up until like 5-6 years ago. People didn't understand weight loss. I think now there is no lack of information on how to lose weight. It's very simple. You take less energy in than your body needs, but actually learning how to lose weight and change behaviors and keep it off for good and not diet and do it the right way, that's the really hard part. So how do you like simplify that with clients, maybe when they start, or if someone does inquire with you, how do you get them from thinking about, let's say, dieting in the traditional sense to let's step away from the scales and tracking and focus on a different thing altogether?
I think values are the key. I think if you don't know your own values, it's going to be very difficult. Sorry. Oh my goodness. If you don't know your own values, it's going to be very difficult for you to make choices in moments where there's not a set diet plan. Mm-hmm. So you go on a program, it's X amount of calories or this exact meal plan, and then you find yourself in a social situation. And I think a lot of people find themselves in spirals of, they look for some kind of diet rule or coach to help them control their eating. But then those mandates are too strict for real life, and then they feel out of control with their eating. So the first thing I tend to do with pretty much all my clients now is a little bit of value work. This isn't exactly new or revolutionary, but bringing it from the, say, psychology world into the eating world actually can be very transformative. So if you pick your values, and let's say we'll pick simple ones. You want to be wise, caring, and healthy. It is easier to make decisions that are wise and healthy and caring when you know what that means. So if you're out, you're having fun with friends, and the dessert that you don't even like that much is on the table, not particularly wise to have that. Mm-hmm. And if you are on a holiday, like I was recently, where I was in Berlin and my Argentinian friends bought me these incredible Argentinian desserts, I had a second one. I didn't need a second one, but I also know that I don't get one when I go back to Ireland. So it was wise and fun and self-caring for me to allow myself a second one. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people don't quite realize the depth of guilt and shame that has been kind of intertwined with eating behaviors until they learn to actually self-reflect. Well, what does health look like in context? What does health in context? What is a wise choice in context? I mean, a cake, if eating cake at your children's birthday party is important, then we need to be able to do that happily. But if not eating cake to escape stress in the evening is also important, then we need to develop the skills to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think of more eating behaviors like learning a language, where it's easy in theory, just conjugate the verbs and speak. Great. But it doesn't actually teach you in the moment strategies for skill development. Mm-hmm. And I think anything that you value about a goal, you have to value the insight it gives you about yourself in the process. Anything. Losing 10 pounds. I know it's cliche. Everyone tells you losing weight won't make you happy. It's almost so wise that it's lost its punch because everybody's saying it. But you don't want to lose 10 pounds. It's not deep enough. It's who do you want to be on that journey? How do wise, calm, connected, happy people get there? And I think even
being able to reflect on that, sometimes you realize it's not actually the weight loss I want. I want to be rid of the food noise, the guilt, the constant thinking about what I'm going to eat next. And I think values and a little bit of values work, deciding the kind of person you want to be, the strengths you're going to have, the character traits you want to represent. I think they're some of the most important things you can do in the field of nutrition that have actually nothing to do with what you eat.
Yeah. So, and that would be where you would suggest starting for somebody, is looking at your values.
I think even if that sounds a little bit deep and heavy, yeah, I think deciding what does wisdom in action look like to you? What does health in action? Like if we look at what, for example, a lot of people are stuck in this cycle simply because they want to lose weight and they don't realize it. Weight gain in action looks like eating foods you're not noticing, kind of getting rid of the app or the meal plan and going into screwed mode and starting tomorrow, not paying attention, zoning out in front of the telly, eating a packet of biscuits and promising to skip tomorrow, fasting in response to binge eating. These are all, and I don't want to put any panic into people, but these are all what you might call like weight gain behaviors in action. So I like to think of, well, what does weight loss in action look like? And it's very unspectacular. It really is. It's noticing textures and tastes that you don't like. It has very little to do with calorie tracking. It's much more about intentional eating. So when you clarify your values, I think it's a lot easier to make decisions. I don't think it's easy. I think it's easier, and I think it's worthwhile. Like if we're hanging out, sure, I could eat the thing that's there because it's free, but I also might decide, no, you know what, that doesn't fit my values. I'm going to wait for something a little bit later. I always use this example on my own content. I met a client for lunch a few years back, about 5 years ago, and a kind of a free pastry or croissant came with the coffee. And I don't like pastries. Just, I never have, even when I was a child and I had no interest in fitness. I never liked them. Just didn't get it. So I didn't eat mine, didn't even notice it was there. And then when they got cleared and taken away, my client said, "Man, you are so disciplined. You didn't flinch." And I, "Flinch? At what?" He's like, the pastry, the croissant. And I said, "Oh, dude, that wasn't discipline. I don't like that taste." And he didn't eat it because I didn't. But I think he liked it. I assume he did from the way he was speaking. But he didn't eat it because he thought, well, Paul's not eating it and he's a coach, therefore I'm not going to eat it.
Felt like he shouldn't be eating it.
Exactly. Yeah. But then when I decided I was going to get a beer, and I ordered the craft beer, and he said something like liquid calories, like you're ordering the calorific drink. He didn't say it as, cut and dry as that, but he was kind of inquiring like, I heard you shouldn't drink your calories. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, like not 7 days a week, maybe, but it's my favorite beer. I'm just going to have one or two. And he didn't really want a drink, but he ended up getting a drink with me because I wanted one. And then he did want the dessert thing and he didn't eat it because I wasn't eating it. And I kind of did say to him, mate, this has all the hallmarks of someone that doesn't know their values. You haven't clarified what is important to you and who you're going to be in certain decisions. So I don't think nutrition is about adhering to some, like everyone knows, man, protein, calories, blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows that. The real magic is in context where you can't control everything, what is worthwhile and what isn't. These might sound extremely simple behaviors, but they're actually really transformative. Yeah,
and it is the simple stuff. Like even I had a client who started 2 weeks ago, and the first week, so she has a food diary each day, and at the bottom of every food diary, I just say, just put a little bit of a reflection for the day, and that's really where the magic happens. It's not even in the eating or what you're eating, it's more what you thought about your eating and the changes that happened there. And she said she had a pizza, but she left 3 slices behind. And she was like, I never would have done that before. She goes, I was actually full and I stopped enjoying it. And then I used your words with the weight loss behaviors in action. I said, that's a weight loss behavior in action, but those things done consistently, that's what leads to the transformative change that people are after. But trying to sell them that idea, it's very hard. And I think a lot of those people are used to like, what I would call like intensity, like with dieting, like it needs to feel hard, because I kind of recognize that in myself, where anything worthwhile needs to feel intense or hard or difficult. Or for example, if you're in the gym, you need to sweat or you need to burn a load of calories for it to be worthwhile, which isn't true. And then real weight loss and long-term kind of change with weight loss behaviors and stuff often feels like nothing is really happening because it's kind of happening in the background and it's so subtle, so how do you get someone on board with that idea if they've been so used to intensity for so long?
can't really blame people for the intensity piece too, because it's what social media and the world in general at large rams down people's throats. You know, no days off, intensity, grind, all that stuff, crazy workouts. I honestly think conversation, like the one we're having right now, where somebody might feel like they're not doing enough. And then you just remind them, no, you actually are doing enough. Please don't mistake ruminating on something for purposeful action. So what people typically do when they create space in their brain, they create a calm environment, they stop eating calories in situations where the absence of calories was the problem, or wasn't the problem, should I say. As in, they're not using food for non-food needs is a better way to say that. So yeah, like someone might feel like, oh my God, I don't actually feel like I'm doing that much, simply because they've committed to maybe not eating standing up or plating foods or something to that effect. And by the way, everything that I talk about on my page, on podcasts, compassion, joy, peace, a good relationship with food, these are the best behaviors, whether you have a weight loss goal or not. I was interviewed by a newspaper a couple of years ago because one of my clients lost 120 pounds. And they asked me what he ate. And I said, I have no idea. I didn't tell him what to eat. We never discussed that once. And they couldn't accept that at the paper. So they were asking, well, like, what was he allowed to eat? What was he not allowed to eat? And I said,
what was the diet?
Basically, you'd have to ask him. Because I was thinking, look, it's kind of like asking me, how did he spend his money? Or like, I have no idea what the guy buys. I just know that in the economy, income, outcome, simple as that. So as long as he understands that, he's golden. But behavior is a language, and we're running a behavior modification program. That's what we're doing. Anyway, they asked, well, what was the deciding factor? And they were expecting a food-based answer. And I said, look, people who lose 120 pounds, they're not celebrating a calorie deficit or a diet. They're celebrating new coping tools, compassion, kindness, unconditional permission to eat, and then reframing certain things like permission to say no. As in, you don't have to eat the dessert you're not enjoying. You don't have to eat the chips that are actually soggy because you put them on your tongue and you're like, these aren't actually as nice as I thought. Questioning, the stories that you've picked up about the world. One of my clients recently asked me something about bread. And when we uncovered it, it was going back to a belief she'd picked up in childhood, kind of from that diet culture world, if you like. So a conversation, man. When you talk about clients, people are smart. Like I have clients who work in various fields, everything from bankers, motivational speakers, influencers, heart surgeons, self-employed people. People are smart, really smart. And everyone has hard things, difficult things in their life. And I guess people who hire me, food and maybe body image is their hard thing. So like nobody's ringing me going, mate, I'm in a great place with my nutrition and my body image is tops. Do you have any space for coaching? It's obviously, look, diet and body images, it's fallen by the wayside. It's not going great right now. And then it's just picking apart. It's finding people's own true internal motivations for change, their values. I go back to values. So I think it's about pulling out of people, what is important to you? You're cool. Yeah, you should work out 5 days a week, but can you? Do you want to? Even last year, I stopped training with weights. I just do body weight stuff now, literally just push-ups and pull-ups. And even for someone who does the work that I do, I was kind of doing my bro program thinking, I hate this. This is so boring. I should do bicep curls. Why? I don't want to. So yeah, that kind of value, self-awareness piece. And I think if you speak to people,
really.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. If you're able to, one of the things I want to do is I want shame or any kind of guilt to come and suffocate and die when people work with me. I really do. I want people to feel if they can tell me anything and it's just like, yeah, you can be human here. You can be human, because protecting whatever stories, mechanisms you're struggling with, it's not going to work. And I think most people don't have these kind of experiences with personal trainers in the diet industry. I think there's a lot of fabulous personal trainers, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking the industry. I think
it's not the majority.
I think the kind of personality that's likely to climb to the top of algorithms or that's likely to be making huge money is the kind of person likely to do and say anything. Whereas I think a lot of really good people, they're almost afraid to value themselves in a certain way. And I think that's something that's kind of backward about the industry. But I think there's a lot of great people.
Yeah. I think I've met a lot of shit personal trainers. Not afraid to say that. I probably went in to the industry with the idea that, everybody must love helping people. And because that's what I helped one of my best friends lose life-changing amount of weight for him, and he got confident and just his whole life changed. And I saw it and I was like, holy shit. And he kept thanking me. And to this day, he thanks me. And I don't really know what I did. I was just there to support him and talk to him. And I didn't tell him what to eat. I just gave him a bit of encouragement and stuff. Once I saw that, I realized this is where my passion lies, is in helping people, especially with the gym, because that's what changed my life as well. But then I got into the industry thinking that this is how everyone is. And it turns out there's a lot of people who are actually just out there to either make a lot of money, or like I've heard ridiculous things like criers or buyers, and trying to get people to cry on the phone and getting people to take out loans on the phone. I've heard ridiculous things, and I don't want to get into it too much, but I think it was the last few years have been real eye-opening for me, because I've had friends as well who are personal trainers who end up just not being the best people. And I think from a client perspective, sometimes you sign up to someone you think it should work because they're a personal trainer, it's worked for other people. And I think you have to stop and question whether or not it's for you or that person is for you as well, because maybe it isn't the plan or the program or the coach. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's the plan or the program or the coach that isn't working, or the diet. Like, I think the biggest one I see is slimming clubs, and not to beat on them too much, but I'll have people who are doing them for 20 years and I'm like, is it working? No, not really. Like, you're doing it for 20 years. Like, would you go to anyone else for 20 years and not see any progress and continue to go? And I think a lot of that comes down to like a feeling of shame around them failing at weight loss.
I think there's a lot of shame kind of attached to eating, a lot of morals attached to eating anyway. So I mentioned earlier about changing how people see themselves. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time it is going to be people who don't realize they're stuck in such difficult cycles being taken advantage of by people who know that they're a quick buck, 100%. And the only thing you can do is fight the good fight. It's the only thing.
So when it comes to kind of overeating, what are the main sort of driving factors for overeating? Is there a few set reasons people overeat, or do you think it's very individual?
I mean, it's individual in that everyone will have their own reasons, but there's patterns. There is behavioral patterns. I always joke with clients, I know what's going through your head before you do, because they joke like, wow, it's like you're in my mind. Yeah. But when you're in it 10 years and you love what you do like I do, and you work one-on-one, I've never had a group thing, so I'm always one-on-one at the moment. And I think that'll be about to change. I think a course will be coming out soon. But in terms of just one-on-one coaching, you see patterns. I think the classic one is the black and white, all or nothing thinking. Things are all good or all bad, no middle ground. I think probably an underappreciated one is people's tendency to reduce their own suffering as silly or daft or stupid. So then that actually prevents the humility to self-reflect and get to a place where they could improve upon the skill. I think everyone's defense mechanisms look different. I always joke, right? Orla, for example, my girlfriend, fiance, she will correct me on that one. I might drink a cup of water and I leave it on the table. And then she might say, like, why is the cup there? And I'm like, because I left it there. She's like, yeah, but why is it there? Like, because I put it there when I had a drink. And instead of thinking, oh, she likes a tidy house, obviously I get defensive. I'm like, oh, Paul, you're just unburdened by trivialities. My relaxed, carefree nature is punctuating this benevolent nature that I have. But in getting defensive internally, I lose the humility to be a better person, a better partner. And I actually think that's a bit of a metaphor for when you reduce or get defensive or when you dismiss something, you lose the space to figure it out. And I think some people in a kind of a different but similar kind of way, they reduce their suffering. They think this is daft. It's chips. It's just chips. I should be able to figure eating out. There's people starving in the world. And I'm over here, not figuring this out. But I think compassion and perspective can coexist. If you can access gratitude for having a healthy body and for having food, fabulous, amazing. That's a superpower. But that doesn't mean you have to diminish your own problem and push it away as irrelevant, because I think that silences the voice that begs for healing. And that's a huge challenge. So there's the black and white thinking. There's the absence, I guess, of compassion, reducing one's own suffering. There is, I guess, to a degree, confirmation bias. People still, they'll say the platitudes that coaches say, like, oh, no good and bad food, but it's not changed behavior. It's still very much driven by all or nothing kind of thinking. And then there's asking yourself too, like if you're stuck in cycles of, say, emotional eating or overeating every time you lose weight, like what is that overeating cycle offering you? It's giving you something. What is it? Because I think that's a very important question to self-reflect on as well.
Yeah.
There are a few.
I asked a client last week, I just said, what is that? Not just what is it giving you, but what do you stand to lose if you aren't overeating, or if in this client's case, it was, overeating a little bit of food and a couple of glasses of wine. And I said, what do you stand to lose if we took that away? If that was gone tomorrow, if I told you, and this isn't a rule or restriction or anything, if you went a month without overeating or having the wine to deal with whatever you're dealing with, what do you stand to lose? And I think she spent a lot of time thinking about it, but hopefully she comes back with an answer.
What about the fear of success?
Yeah.
I think some people feel they don't deserve to be happy or successful. Maybe they've grown up in a house where they had to reduce themselves to keep an unhappy parent at bay or whatever. So they've actually grown up with this innate sense that my needs don't matter, I'm not worthy of success. And so subconsciously there's a kind of a familiar feeling that they get pulled back to, where the script has long been written, and that's going to be the familiar equilibrium, I guess, that they get pulled back to. Might sound a little bit of a deep analysis in the context of eating, but it's something that I see. Fear of success is definitely a huge obstacle. It's whether it's the actual fear of achievement or maybe feeling that one doesn't deserve it. That's another thing as well.
Yeah. And how do you like break that?
In a coaching perspective, I still think values work, deciding who you're going to be. Because I think when I look at things, basically, you get a difficult feeling. Maybe it's some kind of, I'm having a bad body image day, or I'm having those familiar feelings of self-worth issue. And I think a lot of people try and either like immediately just change or fix that feeling. And I think that's the idea, is not to do that. The idea is to take actions with that feeling that take you kind of closer to the person you want to be. So I had a client recently, and I loved that she did this. She's suffering from grief. So she, in her words, had put on a lot of weight because of eating as a coping tool, because of the grief of the loss of a loved one. And she was having a difficult day where one of her wedding outfits for her friend's wedding didn't fit. And we went through it, and it was like, look, you cannot change the dress fitting today. You cannot change your body in any meaningful way in the short term. The only thing you can do is just allow that feeling to exist, and now decide what behaviors are going to take you closer to the kind of person you aspire to be based on your values, and the kind of behaviors that take you away from the person you don't want to be, or that you want to be. Double negative. You get my point. And she ended up just going for a walk. Now, again, it's kind of like one of those things where it sounds so simple, and on the other side, it's profound, where she went for a walk because she decided eating her way through that feeling, which had been her coping mechanism, wasn't going to do anything. I mean, either way, a walk wasn't going to change her body, and eating through the feeling wasn't going to inherently change the body. But the cumulative effect of practicing one or the other of those behaviors over the next 5, 6, 7 months will be very telling. And I think this has to go beyond weight loss. I say to everybody, look, I totally get the desire to change your body. We live in a diet-obsessed world. But if you can't go beyond weight for changes, I don't see this sustaining. If you couldn't lose a pound for the rest of your life, and we were in this position for whatever position we're calling it, would you still value the changes we're making? Would you still want to nourish yourself, be healthy? Would you still want to feel good? So I think that's important too. But yeah, realizing that like difficult feelings are part of the journey. You're going to have bad body image days. You're going to have certain urges. If you can dismiss the urge to act impulsively and then take more long-term decisions, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And I think we probably dismissed that a little bit because it sounds so obvious.
I'd actually said to that client as well that she said, what are the big things that I can do now? Like, what are the big things I'm missing? Because we've done a year of like not restrictive dieting or looking at weight loss or checking the scales or tracking calories, or a year of like weight neutrality, I think it would be called, which is a very hard thing to sell to people, the idea of not focusing on weight loss. But she said, I think I'm ready now. So what are the big things, after everything's changed with a relationship with food and everything, what are the big things I can do now? And I said, it's not actually the big things, it's the little things. But I think where we need to work now is for you to get to a position where you're able to sit in the discomfort or that uncomfortable feeling you get just before you overeat, or just before you go for the wine, or just before you try to escape that feeling. It's being able to actually sit with that. And I think doing that can be very scary, because people are afraid of what will happen if they just sit with that, and not just not do anything, but to sit with it and not act or take an action straight away, and then try to do something else that will help you maybe deal with whatever is uncomfortable, whether it's stress or sadness or the stress of a busy day, and find a healthier kind of outlet. And is there, apart from say walking, because for most people they probably struggle with overeating at like 10 or 11 p.m. or, it's going to be before bed. It's usually not first thing in the morning. What are some healthier sort of ways to regulate, we'll say?
That's up to the person.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say with certainty is we need a pause between the desire to do something and then the choice. Pause. 5-10 minutes. Stop and think. We're trying to get to a place where we're not using calories and foods in situations that the problem won't be solved with calories and foods. So that doesn't mean you can never eat for pleasure or emotion at all. It just means it can't be your only tool. So the idea that a person would sit and reflect on what tools and coping strategies they're going to have to regulate themselves, to soothe themselves in stressful situations, whatever it might be. People might read, call a friend, go for a walk, watch some television. They might eat something pleasurable or an intentional meal without distraction. You need a list of non-calorific coping strategies, because that's just the answer. Like, if we use food every single time, we don't need it, then there's no calorie changes or food swaps that are going to work for that. So the real answer is just take a pause. Take a 5-10 minute pause. That space between wanting and doing. And
give it time. I think usually the intensity of it goes down after sitting with it.
Yes and no. I mean, it's so lovely to sit here and say pause, but I think the real thing is, okay, then what? Well, the idea is that space gives you a little bit of time to practice your new perspectives or your new skills based on your new values. So if I've decided that I'm going to be wise, I'm going to be thoughtful and healthy, I get to pick a couple of minutes to think, okay, look, it's easy to do this very self-betraying behavior, but I said no more easy, I'm going worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And then you're looking, okay, what's wise, what's thoughtful, what's intentional? And it's bringing forth whatever skills and perspectives you've acquired along the journey so that you can start to make new decisions. It's trying to lose that impulsivity that when people get swept away by their emotional intensity. It's interesting because I've gotten very into personal finance in the last few years. I love it so much. And the one thing it's really taught me is, and I'm pretty good for this already, if I'm honest, I got to be straight, but impulsive spending. It's just brought such a different level of intention to my life. It's unbelievable. I also think of one of my wonderful clients who lost 60 pounds, and we never once talked about food. She still puts values to this day as the absolute catalyst for that. And when I asked her to expand on it, she said, "You're not just my coach. You're my financial coach. You're my social coach, etc. Things of that nature." And I asked her to expand, and she said, well, I used to be a people pleaser. People wanted to go to the pub and go for a load of drinks. And I just kind of went, and I'd get really drunk and I wasn't having a good time. And then Sunday was a hangover day. And as soon as I stopped going to the pub on Saturday evening, Saturday nights, about half of my friend group just slightly fell through the filter and about half stayed. And what that happened was that half went swimming with her on a Sunday morning in the sea, and they went for coffee together, and they still went for a drink, but they didn't go and get tanked basically. And she says that when she lost that desire to people please and she put her needs first, she kind of realized how just subconsciously it had gotten for her to not even realize that she had a need go unnoticed. And this isn't her friend's fault. She was kind of half hoping they'd read her mind. But I kind of said, if you haven't communicated, they're only going to treat you in a way that you've enabled. It gets messy, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to just start doing things that are important to you. So there's a real, again, that pause and that values give you. She was able to think, look, I don't want to be hungover tomorrow. It's tempting to drink tonight. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking her to not want to drink. I'm not asking her to not be tempted by certain things. I'm asking her to realize, is the consequence of this behavior going to be worth it? Do you want to feel like this tomorrow? Because it's just the answer. That pause and then deciding if the behavior is worth the consequence. How we get there does matter, of course, but that's just it.
I think it's comes down to just like considering yourself a bit more as well, and being like very selfish, which I think I'm naturally good at doing, but I can see so many people don't stop and think, is this something I want to do, or am I, let's say with going out with the friends, is it something I'm doing because of the fear of missing out, or because I don't want to feel lonely, or it's like, is it important to you or not? Like, do you want to go out and drink, 2 drinks, or do you want to go out and drink at all? Do you want to go out and socialize but not drink? But being able to stop and think about that, I think, is important. If someone like doesn't know what their values are, where's like a good place to start?
There's some good online resources. You could just Google a value sheet and just decide the words that come out. Like, my values work is really straightforward. I send over a values list and I say, don't overthink this. Pick a couple of words that really stand out. One of my wonderful clients recently picked fun. And I was like, why fun? And she said, I'm 22 years yo-yo dieting, and I have never allowed myself to have fun with a behavior change, ever. And I was like, wow, that's a good insight. So she said, so I'm going to do this. We joke about it. Less tax audit energy, more puppies running through bubbles energy. And fun. She's bringing fun to it. Yeah. And I'm like, look, I'm not asking you to dance and put glitter on your eggs on toast. I'm asking you to bring more joy to the unspectacular moments, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just about kind of asking yourself what's important to you that you've been neglecting a little bit. I remember when my own relationship with food was really messed up. I met my girlfriend, and I had gotten into such a restrictive place that I didn't realize that pretty much everything was off the table except for proteins and vegetables, pretty much, and some healthy carbs. And then my girlfriend made an omelette, and it was like an explosion of flavor in my mouth. And I was like, what is in this? And she's looking at me thinking, it's eggs, onions, mushrooms, garlic. It's an omelette, mate. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is the nicest thing I've ever tasted. And she's like, it's an omelette. And like, we're only dating 5 minutes at this point. Yeah. How she's with me, mate, I have no idea. But I was like, oh my goodness, in my mind, I'm like, I'm down at egg whites with maybe 1 yolk if I'm feeling adventurous. That was honestly a moment where I was like, I have to get myself out of this diet restrict cycle. And I was obviously very lean just after competing in men's physique. And that's when I kind of realized in that chapter of my life that bodybuilding, the venture, I know a lot of people like to kind of piss all over it after they've done it. That's not my style. But at the same time, like, it didn't express my highest values. It took certain values that I hold and then went beyond it, and it brought up my, say, neuroticism, perfectionism that I don't have. I don't have perfectionistic tendencies. It brought up my levels of worry. So obsession, things like that. Traits that I don't associate with myself. So it went beyond thoughtful, mindful, intentional into territory that would be dangerous for my relationship with food. So anything I value now about a process, I value because of the insights it gives me into myself, the benefits it has on my life and those that I love, and maybe my clients, that kind of thing. I can't even remember the question.
But it was about the values. So if someone doesn't know their values,
yes,
to start.
Yes, exactly. So that's where I'm like realizing, say, in those moments, going, oh my goodness, this lifestyle is not reflecting my highest values. Yeah. Like at the time, so I'm lean, I'm sub 10% body fat, very visibly lean. And I'm like, but getting lean is a goal, but being really wise, fit, strong, happy, content, thoughtful, balanced along the process, that's a value. And now what I've come to learn, and I hope this lands with anyone who's listening, is when you clarify your values truly and you start to practice them more, your goals become easier to hit. Yeah. Or you kind of stop obsessing over goals and outcomes because there is no end date. Like, my current goal is to get 20 strict ring to chest pull-ups. Ring to chest. Like, I won't count it if I get to here, that kind of thing. And I'm at 15 or 16. Nothing's going to change in my life today at 20.
I was going to say, what's going to happen when you're 20?
But my client asked me that last year. I told her I was trying to get a 50 kilo pull-up, chin up. And she just said, why? And I was like, I think it looks cool. She goes, yeah, what happens after? And it was actually the first time I was like, that is a good question. I haven't thought about that. Just a silly little mini metaphor. But so values, you just kind of think about what's important to you. Maybe what have you been missing? What you really want to have. Like, a lot of clients will email me and they're actually admitting their values. They don't realize it. They'll say, like, I want to be able to eat normal. I want to be able to have food with my kids on a Saturday without thinking about it. I want to be able to go out for wine. I want to create nice recipes. I want to be able to cook. I used to love cooking. I've forgotten to cook. And then people will, unbeknownst to themselves, saying I value family, thoughtfulness,
adventure with my nutrition or, recipes. They're telling me what they value in not so many words. I'm like, fabulous. You've done some of the hardest work. You actually know what's important to you. A lot of people come and they haven't clarified what's important to them yet. So.
Yeah, and I think you asked me a good question a few years ago, which is like, what does your kind of ideal day look like if there was, let's forget money, forget work, forget location, all of that. Like, what would you do with your time? And for most people, it's not drive a Lamborghini or be on the beach ripped to bits. And it's like, I want to have time to get up with my family and have tea and breakfast with them and enjoy what I'm eating and, try to maybe start there, because that really helped me understand where I wanted to be. And that is how my day-to-day looks, where I have time for breakfast. I have the things that I valued in my life probably every day, but I sort of created that for myself. When you asked me, I didn't know how. I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen. I was like, that was so far from where I was. But 6 months to a year later, that's where I found myself, because I got very clear on what I wanted, and the life I wanted to kind of live.
Who you want to be in certain situations. That'll often be a very straightforward start with clients where get up 15 minutes earlier. It's an act of self-care to get up 15 minutes earlier so that you can have a breakfast. It doesn't feel like much, but if you're running out the door, stuck for time, which a lot of us are, 15 minutes earlier is enough time to put some eggs on toast in a toaster in a microwave and eat something healthy to get your day started. Those kind of things. But yeah, what does your dream day look like? It's so important.